passing motorist stopped into the rest stop along I-84 between Boise and Mountain Home and found this child abandoned in one of the restroom stalls. And so they, of course, immediately got a hold of us, and deputies went out.
Boise made headlines back in January of 1989. A young boy, Eddie Tuinman, was found wearing just a T-shirt. He had been beaten, he was hungry and abandoned at a rest stop, as you just heard Gary Rainey say, between Boise and Mountain Home. If you lived here during that time, you may remember this really disturbing story. His father was charged and went to prison for the crime. More than 30 years later, we found Eddie. He's a true testament of resilience and of the love this community, after all these years, had and has for him. Maggie O'Meara has the story in tonight's 7's Hero.
The headlines were horrifying.
When this happened in 1989, I was a detective, and this wasn't my case, but it was such a big case that really all of us were trying to help and work on it at that time. It was something that is burned in our mind 30 years later.
Former Ada County Sheriff Gary Rainey was a young detective at the Sheriff's Department when the Eddie Tuinman case made national news. A little boy found abandoned, severely beaten, and hungry at a rest stop along I-84.
You know, initially it was shocking to learn that somebody had left their child in the restroom at the rest stop. And then it suddenly became sad to realize the condition he was in, how mentally handicapped he was non-communicative, he couldn't walk, and just the abuse that he suffered was tragic. I mean, that's an understatement for it, and it just hit everybody. How could somebody do this? It just was infuriating. We didn't know who he was for several days, and eventually the news story rippled out and hit the media in Salt Lake, and that's when somebody down there recognized him and called in, and that started the chain of events happening that allowed us to arrest initially his mother and father. How can a parent do this? So it was very emotional for the detectives involved.
Eddie's father was sentenced to 40 years in prison for child abuse and neglect. His mother did not face charges. Investigators say she was also a victim of abuse and cooperated in the case. Eddie was put into foster care. Over 30 years later, we found Eddie is still living here. He was taken in by a couple of families when he was younger, but as an adult, he was once again in need of a family to call his own.
My name is Benito Martinez, and I'm Ed's guardian.
Benito Martinez owns Legacy Rehab in Nampa, which helps people with disabilities live successfully in their own homes. When he found out Ed needed a guardian, he volunteered right away. He knew about his heartbreaking history.
I know he was dumped in a rest area, and somebody rescued him. Ed means my word to me, because he's special needs and they need more love than anybody else, you know. And a person like him, I think we have to treat him like a son.
Ed is nonverbal, but he's able to communicate in his own way through some sign language.
That teaches a little bit. He can understand, you know, us.
He lives in his own apartment in Nampa and is surrounded by caregivers who treat him like family.
I'm with him 24/7. I work with him 5 days a week. He's part of the family. He gets excited, and he's just a fun guy to be around.
His team is amazing. You know, when Ed got COVID last year, his team all decided to go in and quarantine with him for, I think it was about for 2 weeks. They left their families behind, their kids behind, to just make sure that Ed is well. You know, he is loved and cared for at all times.
Hi, Ed. Over the summer, they celebrated a big day for Ed, his 40th birthday.
Everybody came and celebrated his birthday. My family was there. Some other staff's families were there.
Ed is a huge teddy bear. He's always hugging people. His whole life story is remarkable. Ed went from being isolated 24/7 to now coping with life, and that's a huge step in his life.
For Gary Rainey, it feels good to know Eddie is okay all these years later.
I think that's the relief out of this, is knowing that after this event, he had a much better life than he ever would have had in staying with his parents.
To all the people who have welcomed Ed into their lives and homes with open arms over the years,
I just want him to know that he is truly loved by all of us.
He's an awesome guy. Grateful to have him in our lives.
You are Ed's heroes.
To read more about this case and what happened to Eddie back in 1989, just go to the story on our website at ktvb.com.